Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. And again, our goal in the podcast is always to achieve a couple of things for sure. One is to give you some insights that will help you accelerate some of the performance and results in your organization. And also, depending where you are in your career, give you a couple of ideas of how to fulfill your full potential as a leader and as a contributor in your company. And our episode is brought to you by the Frontline Leadership Program. And most people would know that we offer a frontline leadership course, which is 3 days or 6 half days. Well, that's now been expanded into 3 different tiers. So there's the Frontline Leadership Strength and Essentials program, which is very much what the old Frontline Leadership course used to cover. And now we have 2 new tiers, including Drive Performance and Amplify Impact. So if any of that is of interest to you, of course, reach out to us at our website at uniquedevelopment.com. I'm excited to have our guest on the podcast today. His name is Rick Taborda, and we're diving into the world of delicious crackers at this time of year that we're recording this. Everyone's in the midst of having holiday parties, and there's no doubt that RDJ Bakeries crackers are probably on your plate, whether you know it or not, because the company actually provides a lot of white label and private label crackers. So there's a good chance it's being served at your holiday parties. And this is a business that's really been built on the backs or based on great bakers. It's one of the world's great bakers. So Rick Taborda is the CEO of RDJ Bakeries, which is based in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada, but has a customer base that really spans the globe. And RDJ isn't just your average bakery. They're all about putting their bakers first and creating the craveable crackers that you love. Rick leads the charge and is passionate about building a company culture that's as diverse and inclusive as the customers that they serve. We're going to talk about how RDJ has achieved operational excellence and even over a period of rapid growth, how it stays ahead of the trends and bakes up the recipe for operational success. Now, Rick and I have had a lot of really interesting conversations in the work that we've done together. I know I'm always inspired when I talk to him, so I'm looking forward to having him on the show. So welcome to the podcast, Rick Taborda.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
You're welcome. And by the way, if you do want to reach out to Rick, the best way to do it is through the company's website, which is rdjbakeries.ca. So Rick, we're going to cover a few things today, but before we go into that, I'm just wondering if you don't mind, share a little bit about your journey even to today. Like what's been some of your pathways to where you're at right now?
I often ask myself, how did I get here? And because I really haven't worked for a whole lot of people and not working for a lot of people, I haven't been really exposed to different leadership styles and different approaches. And the good thing with being involved with different styles is you get to keep the good and you get to eliminate the bad. And I've really only worked for my father's business, my father-in-law's business, and in university or in high school, I worked, in the bank. And so, but at a higher level after, in my 20s, I've worked for 3 organizations, of which I owned 2. So in saying that, I asked myself, like, how did I get to be in a position where I influence or where I make decisions and those decisions are mitigated to be the right decisions? And your question was like, I think your question was like, how do you get to this
what's
position?
the journey? Yeah, what's the journey? Like, and by the way, if you want to talk about specific sort of milestones that come to your mind, like achievements or successes, that's okay too.
I mean, I'll tell you, I, what I say to myself is I've just been very lucky in where I've been placed in life, right? I mean, I say to people sometimes, Prince Charles's son wakes up and he's a prince, and he wakes up as a prince, and I don't, and neither do you. But at the same time, I have woken up or I have lived moments in my life that I feel have defined me as to who I am today. And those are many times those are challenging moments, right? Moments that not everybody can conquer. And for most people, those moments end up being detrimental, right? Unfortunately. But for me, and looking back, they were moments that I they weren't the greatest moments, but they were moments that built my character and built who I am today and how I look at people in general. And that's where I place the success of RDJ Bakeries. I always look at, I always appreciate and respect the fact that you and I are part of this pack of humans where we belong to the pack of human beings. And those that can understand that can do a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Yes.
So to answer your question, I mean, I've just been very blessed and fortunate to be placed in circumstances that have led to who I am today. Nothing in books, nothing really, just natural occurrences that have
Yeah.
happened to me.
Well, what's good, I know from having talked to you, is you do have a very deep sense of values that I think have guided you and continue to guide you. And knowing how you interact with your other leaders in your organization, those values are important, and you keep reinforcing them over and over again for sure. Um, when I've never really asked you this question, so this is maybe coming a little bit off base, but I'm just curious. You run such a sophisticated operation, but I've never really asked you whether, like, knowing how operations work and setting up lines, and you guys are very high volume producers of crackers, bakery products. I'm just curious, where did that skill set come from to be over an organization which is really a high volume manufacturer?
I had my Enneagram done or performed twice, one by someone in California and one by a local person. I'm always an 825. And you obviously probably know what that is. At the time when I first had it done in California, I didn't quite appreciate what it is, but I can see how I'm an 825.
Hmm.
And I think the five part is I I'm not an engineer. I hated university, dropped out of university, but I'm able to see things three-dimensionally. I do have AD. I have no issues in telling you that I have ADHD.
Yeah.
Um, but that helps me in the sense that I can get very hyper focused. I can go three-dimensional. Like I can actually see if I focus. It doesn't take me long, but I was very into Lego as a kid. So I'm very
Ah, neat.
I'm very blessed that I can work with people and understand people, but I can also understand processes and machines that have no personality, which is interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like I have a very good knack in understanding people and personalities, which is hard to manage, but I can also understand things that don't talk back and that just run on electricity.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect mix of knowledge in manufacturing because you got the people and you got machines. So
Right.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah. So then it's a funny how you're really, I think, underselling yourself, but that's good. That's good. A little bit of humility. Well, because I mean, I've toured your plant, and it's really quite an amazing operation you've got there, and it's had a lot of growth. So then, how do you explain the growth? Is it just because you have great people? Certainly, I've met a number of them. They are pretty awesome. I'm just wondering what has been sort of some of the secret of success in achieving some of the growth that you've had as an operation.
I think that so we've grown from in 7 years, we've grown 900%, and we've gone from 50 people to 1,001 this year in 9 years. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I think that growth can cause a lot of uncertainty, a lot of I mean, I think people like to have control. I
Yeah.
think we'd all like, I think control is a nice thing to have. And the problem with growth is you have the bird and then you try to grab another bird and you might lose this bird. So I think that if I think I'm able to, it does make me somewhat not I'm aware that the company's growing. I'm aware that there's a lot of moving parts. The
Yeah.
interesting thing is that I'm a very convicted. So if I'm convicted in many ways.
Yeah.
So if I apply my conviction
Yeah.
to if I apply my conviction to herd the cattle,
Yeah.
herd the growth, if I apply that conviction, I have zero fear. And I call that strap the bombs to your body, where
Yeah.
I am ready. And
In other
so
words,
that's how,
there's no lack of commitment from your
yeah,
standpoint.
the
You're
commitments.
going, and also probably not much doubt that you'll probably succeed. That there's always a downside of, things might get in the way, but in the end, the conviction kind of carries you through whatever wrinkles might be thrown in your way on that journey to success.
Especially if I see that I see that it's realistic, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm convicted that I want to go to Mars, I mean, so you have to also weigh out those factors too, right?
Yeah.
And then the people that you work with, they see it in your eyes. So when they see that conviction, they believe you. It brings their sense of concern and anxiousness down, and then you become this mass, and you're able to hopefully get it done.
What's funny is you're talking essentially about the flip side of how panic spreads in a group, right? Panic often spreads through facial expression
Yeah, yeah.
and
You
a
know,
sense of things aren't going well. And you're
yep.
saying that the opposite can also be true, which is that people can sense that, no, I'm convinced that we can be successful. And they go, well, I guess if Rick's convinced, I guess we'll go out
Yeah,
and do it. And,
yeah.
and, and then it's just the realities of, hey, we can probably, there's always going to be setbacks and challenges, but ultimately if we stay on our path, we'll probably be successful. So that's awesome. Um, how do you view? I think, well, I know from talking to you, you have some pretty clear views about leadership. How do you think leadership and, say, operational performance interact? And what are some of your thoughts around leaders and what's driven the success at RDJ Bakeries? And maybe I'll use this specific example. I mean, I had the pleasure and honor of working with a couple of your folks to see about how to help them. They were already successful, and it's really just helping unlock additional success. And maybe you could comment on just when you see any leader in your organization and you see them doing things, what are the top few things that you always think this person needs to stay focused on this, or this is something we can build on, is this attribute that they have, or something like that?
I think that So I really try to simplify leadership. I use an example. If my daughter saw an elderly person crossing the street with some difficulty, and the lights going amber, and and I see a video of my daughter, or any young person, or anybody for that matter, get out of their car. It's now green, and the person's helping the elderly person cross the street. Personally, I'm in my car and I'm thinking, wow, what a great young
Yeah,
leader. And I think many people would think that in their cars. I
yeah,
really do. And so in saying that, I really try to oversimplify leadership, especially in today's world where everything has so many different definitions.
right.
Leader, everything's
Yeah,
over, good parent, whatever, bad, everything's overdefined. So I try to simplify it. I look at, so if I see someone that's a leader and I see intent, or I see that the person, where someone somewhat loses me is if they decide not to do something or not to lead in such a way
right,
that will cause inconvenience to them. Right.
right.
So I look at leadership from a self perspective, where how much impact will it have to the self versus the other person.
Yeah,
And I find oftentimes that more often than not, I find that leaders are not high performance leaders because they're more in tune with how it impacts their own self.
yeah,
And it's almost like they forgot that it's not about the self, it's about the others.
right.
But we,
Well,
but it, it's just a really complex thing.
your mindset, I know, is aligned with this. And having talked to your HR leader about this, it's like this idea of servant leadership. So really, what you're describing is that you should always be looking at how you're going to be of service to someone else in delivering whatever the expectations are. Not that that person answers to you, but that you actually answer to them as the leader.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Um, so one of the things, and I'm just curious because I haven't asked you this, is that in a lot of companies, especially ones that grow like yours has grown, and you end up adding these teams, because like you said, at one point it was just 50 people and you could kind of get everybody mostly on the same page fairly quickly. Now you're dealing with, like you said, 1,000 people, and that means you have a bunch of different departments or functions, and everyone's trying to do the right thing. But every once in a while, people get out of alignment sometimes. Like one group thinks they're doing the right thing by going in this direction. Another group thinks we're going the right direction by going in this slightly different direction. And I just wondered, you must have to deal with that. Is there anything that you do specifically to try to bring people back to the main mission or the same page? Like, I know everyone's trying to do their job, but we all work on one team, the RDJ Bakeries team. Any thoughts that come to mind on that?
So I went to a leadership summit with our mother company, and the speaker mentioned that there's a flaw in today's business world where um, it should be more so it should be more fluid. So the way I see business right now is businesses need to be fluid,
Yeah.
where you are getting cross-functional dynamic. But so I use this terminology. I made this up. So water, ice, and so it's like going into a water state and then bringing it into ice, and the ice part is know your role, stay within it, right? Where you're being very, very like the military, right? The
Yeah.
military has to be the way it is, because it's what you lose in the military and in war is the single biggest loss to humankind, of the loss of another life.
Yeah.
They have to be like that, because you lose. So that's ice, where
Yeah.
things have to be very clear, or right. But
Yeah.
there are moments where you have to be guerrilla warfare in
Yeah.
different circumstances. And so how do I break? So I,
So
even in my family, anything I do, I'm always fluid and ice. The problem
Yeah.
I have, that a lot of people have at RDJ Bakeries, is first they have a hard time. They have a hard time to get accustomed to that change of state.
Right.
Ice
That we
to
can be
what?
both.
We can be both.
How to actually accept both, that both are actually okay, that there are times where it's better to be one or the other, but it's okay that we flip back and forth a bit between the two. And you're right, because
Yes.
it's tough, because people want to know, can we just always be fluid? Can we always be ice? And the answer is no. We actually need to
No.
be both at the same time.
You have to get, and then it's the timing.
Yeah.
It's the timing as to when to know to deploy the fluidity, water, but then when to know when. So the leadership, every leader in their own right, me, Josh, Hanan, Khalid, all us leaders, our role is to the timing, right? We have to go, okay, time to deploy, fluid, and then no, bring it back. And so a lot of people get perplexed, they get shell shocked.
Yeah.
Right. And like you look at YouTube videos where you have the Navy SEALs,
Yeah.
and they are like, they are on point, and then they're fighting a not such a sophisticated group of individuals, and you can see, and you can see the difference, right?
Well, so to back what you're saying up, Spotify is run by a gentleman named Daniel Ek, and Daniel Ek said words are cheap, but he didn't mean it actually as a negative. He said words are cheap. That means we should talk about things a lot and even come back to them and cycle back and make sure that we're certain, and then when we're ready, let's go execute.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you mean by fluid and ice too. It's like, hey, let's go back and forth. It's okay that we revisit something. Maybe we didn't quite have it right.
That's fluid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then let's execute. There's your ice, right?
His point was once we decide on something, that's when the true costs start to mount, because now we're actually buying stuff, implementing it, installing it. He says that's when it gets expensive to change. It's not expensive to change when we're in the process of trying to figure out what we're going to do. So I think that's kind of fits with what you're saying. And I do agree that the old traditional structures that a lot of organizations are still playing in, they don't really serve this need for agility and, resilience. Like what's right now might not be what's right in 6 months. What's right when you have 400 team members is not always exactly what you need at 1,000 team members, right? So
Right.
I would agree with you. Now, having walked your halls and seen the folks, you've got a really diverse workforce, and I'm talking now mostly around age. I know you've got a lot of other diversity. You have a tremendous respect for diversity in your workforce. How do you deal with, and you yourself have children, how do you deal
Yeah.
with the younger generation and the middle and the older generation and what the different generations need? Or do you even put much stock into the differences between those age groups?
I don't. I mean, I'm aware that I'm aware that my daughters and the younger generation have been raised and were born in an environment where, things are much more convenient. You can get food delivered to your house, and it's not their fault. I mean,
Yeah,
corporations are making profit in doing that.
yeah,
So I'm aware of that, and that has its we say repercussions in the sense that there's a term snowflake, but it's not. I mean, so they're not as resilient and maybe not as creative with how they approach things.
yeah,
But the reason why I don't put a lot of thought, I don't, because I was just talking to my supply chain director yesterday, and if you look at 1,000 years ago to about 1920,
yeah,
humans were like 1,000 years ago to 1920. There was really not. There's a delta plus in technology and stuff, but
yeah.
not this extreme. And
Shift,
then
yeah,
if you look at 2000 to 2020, like the exponential growth of conveniences and
yeah,
technology is really like at a but why am I bringing that up? Because nonetheless, 5,000 years, humans are the same. So fundamentally, yeah, technology has done whatever in the past 20 years, and it has repercussions, right?
yeah,
Information comes at a much quicker speed, but fundamentally, we still have that human instinct. And so I really don't put a lot of thought behind. If I have people that work for me that are a certain age, but they can, but they can keep up and they can
yeah,
perform and they're not going to resign or quit. Who am I to critique that? Do I have to? I think that as much as we complain, you and I, because we come from a different generation, as much as we maybe, sorry, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but as much as I sometimes complain that younger people are not as resilient or as um, tenacious as my generation, I can also say to myself that I have to acknowledge the fact that there's a reason for them to be that way. So
yeah,
I have to shift, and I have
yeah,
to acknowledge the fact that they've been raised in a certain environment. So therefore, I have to look at it from a different lens. But we've become this in so many aspects. We've become our level of, and it's so simple, right? Like our level of being able to identify these simple facts.
yeah,
Facts.
yeah,
It's like we want to turn a blind, like we want everything to be so black and white, like what we're
yeah,
seeing on YouTube. We just want to, be drawn
yeah,
to this little black thing and believe that it's reality.
yeah.
It's almost like we're all in an alcoholic state, and then when we come off of it, like,
Well, I do. It's interesting. I never. This is why I enjoy our chats because you have a way of framing things. I think that's very unique, which is why you're successful. Um, and one of the things that I think people are looking for certainty there's an illusion of certainty. It's not really like there's not much you can be totally certain about. Maybe your core values, but it's hard to be certain about almost anything else because it's more of a fluid state. And I think people are looking to fixate things that are really meant to actually be fluid, and it's okay that it's fluid. Like embrace that. The other thing, I suppose, if you're talking about resiliency, and it's not just young people. And I might botch this quote, but it says, tough times breed tough people breed easier times breed easier people bring tough times again. Like, in other words, it's a cycle to everything. And yeah, there's going to be a difference in your life if you've gone through some really difficult challenges. Or I think of my dad growing up in the Depression times and hearing his parents worry about whether they had food on the table. That's something I didn't experience, so I know I got things a lot easier than he did. So my mindset isn't the same around that. It's not necessarily better or worse. People always say that, well, you definitely find that challenging times do make you a person, but they also sometimes make you more jaded because now
yeah,
you're closing yourself off to opportunities because you're overly fixated on security instead of just doing what's right. And so I think the whole thing is really, I love this idea of fluid and ice, and even ice turns back into fluid after a while, depending
Yeah.
on the climate. So, yeah, this has been a really cool discussion. I just wondered, I mean, we've already covered a lot of really interesting ground. Is there anything else that you thought would be interesting to share that I didn't ask you about?
I mean, this session's about leaders, right? And I think that if I think that if we just, in my opinion, if we just simplify if we just simplify that term leader, I'll end with this.
Mm-hmm.
I was reviewing the onboarding records in our company, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
them, and it's boring as heck. I have to review them because it's very important. And so I made a note while I was reviewing the onboarding records. I made a note. My director of HR, and it was in front of me, and she didn't see. I made a note that said audit. So I made a note to randomly audit one of our teammates against the onboarding record.
Yeah.
Because we all want things, we want to just lie to ourselves and say, Greg, this is how you bottle this water. Now go do it. I told him it's not my fault he cut off his hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I was going to audit. So then I came in one morning at the next day at 5 in the morning. I was going to send, and I sent an email and I said this. I said, I wish I had it in front of me, but I said, to onboard, you have to teach. Basically, I forget how I said it, but this is what I said. Everyone says leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what's more important than being to be defined as, I think what's more important is to be a good teacher.
Teacher, yeah.
If you look at all great leaders, and then I started thinking on my way home that night, and I wish I can word it the way I emailed, but basically, I in that email was making the point that a teacher, and I don't want to take that statement to say, okay, so a good teacher is a good leader. No,
No.
be a good teacher. And then I was driving home that night. I thought, a lot of great human beings, forget leaders, because leaders, the word leader, but a lot of great human beings have been amazing teachers.
Yeah.
And their teachings have been, written and taught for generations, right?
So first of all, I've been searching for this word to define you. Pointing my finger. It's like this, that I think teacher actually encapsulates things, because for me, I'm always amazed with the amount of patience that you have to explain the why behind things and to explain what your thinking is and why it's important. And so I can see why you've locked in on that. And just to support what you're saying, if you look at the leading business schools around the world, there is no acceptable definition of what a leader is. There's no consensus around what a good leader is. So I think it's totally great to sort of say that a leader, it's not even being a leader, you're just a good teacher. And because teaching implies that you can communicate what you're saying to someone else so that they can understand it, that they can do something with it, and ideally maybe even teach somebody else someday. So I think you're onto something there. I really appreciate, first of all, Rick, that you took time. I know you had a really busy day today, so the fact that you spent time here, and the fact that you and I have had some interesting discussions and we finally got one on tape, I think is awesome. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate our friendship and a relationship. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
All right. And thank you as an audience member. I hope that you got some value out of this. I think, what you're seeing is a trend of common responses, even though I think Rick's was maybe more uncommon initially, but there's a commonality, which is that we're really talking about affecting people, not necessarily equipment. Yes, equipment is important, technical aspects are important, but really it's the relationship that we have with people and our ability to communicate and teach them and align with them that's really important. And of course, if we can be of any service to you through the leadership training that we deliver, you can visit us online at uniquedevelopment.com. For now, I'll just wish you well on your leadership journey.